Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Living the Sweet Life. I'm your host, TJ Sweet, and on this podcast, we are committed to helping you go from where you are to where you want to be. We're going to help you do that by helping you reshape your mindset, teach you how to live with intention, and also how to learn to look at this world through a grateful lens. And as you know, we're shaking things up. We're changing things up, how we're doing the podcast. This week, again, we get to have Bryon Sweno from Sweno Visuals. We get to have him in studio with us. And we dive into a really, really great topic that is probably more relatable than some of the other topics. But we talk a lot about adversity and how to build resilience. And in this first a little bit of this episode, the beginning of the episode, we talk a lot about particular moments. And those challenging moments that maybe it's the start of adversity, maybe it's that a moment that gets your attention to really then shape you to become the person to overcome that adversity. We talk about the habits, we talk about the mindset shift, we talk about purpose. There's a whole bunch of things that we talk about because getting on the other side of adversity, the only way you can be on the other side of it is if you grow through it, not just go through it, but grow through it. Go ahead and take a moment to subscribe to this episode and to this podcast, whether you're watching on YouTube or maybe you're listening on Spotify or iTunes. So you get notifications every Monday. As you know, we call it Mindset Monday, that you get notifications that these episodes are live for you. And this one's going to be a longer episode. So we are going to give you everything we have to help you through any adversity you're challenged with in your life so that you can be your best for the people that you love the most. Dig into this great episode about overcoming adversity and building resilience. Hey, Bryon, first of all, I want to say thank you for being on the podcast again. I've heard a ton of great things about what you shared last week, and people are really they're finding more value in what you're sharing and our conversation back and forth. So I appreciate you spending time to do this. And again, being comfortable, being uncomfortable, not being behind the camera, but being on this side with me. We're going to talk a little bit about kind of how resilience is so learning through doing, right? And not so much in overanalyzing. So this week, I really kind of want to dive into something that I think is going to be really powerful for our listeners. And it's about overcoming adversity. Depending on what it is, it could be in your personal life, your professional life, it could be finances, it could be in a relationship, it could be physical adversity that you've gone through. So I want to kind of dive in a little bit on kind of one, acknowledging that it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. So hoping that it doesn't isn't a strategy. Really believing that we have the skills and the ability and the confidence to overcome it is really the sweet spot that I want to try to settle in today. So kind of being vulnerable, but we're both going to share some things that are, kind of our own personal adversities, but also how we've overcome it. Mm-hmm. So do you have something in mind, so when you think about your mindset, and we've talked a lot about that, but when you think about is there any particular moment or any particular chapter of your life that you would kind of think about that you had some adversity that you it was a turning point, a pivoting point to where you knew you couldn't have that same mindset, the same habits after that moment? Is there anything like that resonates for you?
Mm-hmm. I think about a moment. It seems like a whole lifetime away almost now because I've been so entrenched in what I'm doing and pursuing this full time and stuff I've been full time for 4 years now. But before that, I worked at a factory here in town, and I did like painting of the boats, and there was a boat factory here in town. And we started having kids, and kids cost a lot of money, They
do.
And,
they're worth it, and they cost a lot of money, but yeah.
And there was a moment where I was working full-time at the factory, and I was even working overtime a lot at the factory. And I had this little ice cream pail that I would always just dump my change into. And I always kept it in the back of my mind, ice cream pail can't hold that much money, but if ever it's needed, we at least have a backup sort of option. And there came a time where I had to cash in that to be able to feed our kids. And as a dad and just as a man in general, that was a wild feeling for me. I've always kind of prided myself on being the provider, And I find enjoyment and get a lot of like self pleasure, I guess, out of being the provider for my family.
Yeah.
And that they can always count on me to do whatever is needed to take care of them. Not only financially, but otherwise, but in this scenario, financially. And that was a weird feeling of almost like, not that I needed to be like disappointed in myself, but like I got to figure out something else to do. I got to get through this adversity. I got to figure out something to where this doesn't happen again. And that was like a light switch moment for me where I realized I didn't like working at the factory anyways. I've never been sort of a factory worker. I've always had the creativity. We dove to in the last podcast, but I've played music my whole life. So I've always been like artistic, and that's just how my mindset sort of works. And I was like, I need to find something that I want to do. I've always wanted to work for myself. My goal was to work for myself fully by the time I was 30 years old. And I don't know why I ever had that goal, but that like for a long, long time, that was my goal. And I didn't even know what I was going to do. For a long time, I thought it was going to be music or producing music, recording and doing that. And then I picked up a camera one day and I was like, this is the thing. This is going to be the thing. And so I just dove 100% into it. And that was around the time of whenever this happened. I had a camera for about a year or two at that point, but I was just doing it very much on the side and not making any money with it. And so I was like, I should lean into this. I can make this a thing, and this could be the thing that allows me to do what I want to do for a living, for one, but also provide an even bigger source of income and things for my family. So it's going from adversity of not being able to pay our bills, not being able to feed our kids, to now we're thriving. Like, you know, it's only a few years later, honestly. There's that fly again. It's crazy to think that it was such a kind of short time ago. Yeah. But it's like living a totally different life now. And that's one of the benefits of putting your head down, using those moments of adversity. I think pretty much you can touch on this a little bit too, but pretty much everyone that is successful, super successful, has had some sort of a period in their life where they were not. Yep. And it seems like they call it kind of the valley, you know, and it's just almost necessary to go through the valley to get to the mountain almost.
Yeah. I mean, that valley really kind of points you to the purpose, right? And also if you kind of envision like that visual that you just created, the down is often what brings people down and keeps them down because they doubt themselves along the way because they've lost the focus on why. But it sounds like your focus on your family was the why, that no matter what, you didn't know how to do all of this, but you knew that it mattered that you did. You didn't know what it was going to turn into, right? You probably had a vision of some of it, but it wasn't certainty, right? You didn't choose certainty of that, but you chose, I'm certain that we're not going to be here anymore. Right. Yeah. So you chose something different every day. So that's that mindset shift of, I know I never want to be here again, and I know where I can go. Right. And it's that shift. But sometimes that down visually, if you think about this, so that down can kind of then turn into a ramp if you're willing to keep going.
It's like a roller coaster.
Correct. If you're willing to keep going, maybe your adversity, and literally as you're talking, it just made me think about this. Maybe the adversity is our momentum. Right? It's the thing that we feel like is actually bringing us down, but it's actually helping us pick up speed. As long as we're willing to be resilient enough to then be going faster towards the thing that we want. Because when we're really comfortable, it's like this homeostasis. It's like, I'm not uncomfortable. I don't really need to do it. And that's kind of where I've been on some of my journey with this business, right? I've been tinkering at this for 10 years. And if I'm going to be fully honest, I haven't experienced any adversity with the business because I've always had another job. I've never allowed myself to get uncomfortable. I never had to do it. And I chose security for a long time, you know, and then I had some people say, is it really your purpose and your passion, or is it a hobby? And that is a very different approach. So that moment for me, when somebody asked me that simple question, it's not adversity, but it was perspective of like, I have kind of been treating it like a hobby, not because I couldn't do it, not because I didn't want to do it, not because I didn't love being bad at it, but it was because I didn't actually believe in myself. And that's the thing I admire about you. You turned the corner and we're like, no more of that. Yeah. And then like what you've built in a very short period of time. And I hope people listening to this, because there's a lot of people that have the desire to do the thing, but they don't believe in themselves enough to do whatever the thing is that they want to do. And like adversity doesn't mean you're doing the wrong thing. Adversity may actually be, and this Obstacles the Way is a great book too. Adversity may be actual proof that you're doing the right thing, and it gets our attention. Yeah. Right. We have to get uncomfortable to start making new changes and new habits in our lives. And one of the things for me, so I've had 8 knee surgeries on my left knee, 5 in the last couple of years. So I've had some physical adversity as well, but luckily I've been doing mindset work for a long time, but I wasn't immune to some of the downs and ups of having surgeries and being kind of complacent for a while, just having to be. But one thing that I really kind of want to get your thoughts on this, oftentimes when people are going through adversity, so people around them focus on positivity and they focus on hype. The one thing that I really want to poke at a little bit to see if it resonates is focusing more on presence instead of the positivity and habits instead of the hype. So in that moment, when you have the pail and you're using that money, a lot of times people will be like, it's okay. It's just this time. It's just this tough chapter. Like, you got this. Or it's no big deal. Like, you're going to get through it. Payday's next week. It'll be fine. Yeah. But I think people get lost there. So people from an external perspective give you that information, which doesn't actually make you feel like you're being seen or heard at all. But also, if you only do that for yourself and just being like, it's okay, it's not a big deal, like, we got this, because you're trying to self-love and try to be on your own team and all that. But like, maybe being more present and developing new habits is more of the recipe through adversity to build that resilience instead of positivity and hype. Tell me your thoughts on those two things.
Well, in that moment, that was one of the things that there's been a lot of things that I've went through and done. Not that I've had a hard life by any means. I'm a white dude in America. So there's that. I haven't had a terrible life, but I think everyone, no matter what you're born into, no matter where you're from, everyone goes through hard things relative to them,
Sure. Yep.
And so that's where I think anybody listening to this or watching this, no matter where you're from, if you're in a different country, if you're from a different state here, even if you're from our area, we all have different experiences and everyone experiences the same thing differently too. And so there's been several things in my life where I can look back and be like, that was a moment. That was one of them, the cashing in the thing moment. But in that moment, my thought was, I'm not going to let this happen again. And not like, this is okay, because it was. I could have very easily done that. This is what I need to do to feed my kids right now. That's okay. This won't happen again. That would be in denial, because if I kept doing exactly what I was doing, it wasn't enough. And so I took that as basically a challenge, just like we were talking about in the last episode. I view a lot of things as a challenge. If I come across a problem that I've never faced before, it's a challenge to fix it. I like being the person who figures out how to fix things. And that's part of the provider thing. I want to figure out all the issues. And so there's those moments that you go through, and if you can view it as a challenge and how can I overcome this, but not only overcome this, but how can I make sure it never happens again? That's my philosophy on that, is if I make a mistake, or if something happens that I don't like, or that I know isn't the way I want to operate my life and my business or my personal life, then I do whatever I can to make sure that it doesn't happen again if I have any control over it. And not to say that I don't make mistakes and I don't flub up sometimes, but that also gives me some grace whenever that does happen, because I know myself and I know that I will do whatever it takes to make sure that doesn't happen. And so, we've talked about this a lot. I swing in the opposite direction sometimes now. And I feel like sometimes I overcompensate for making sure that never happens again. I feel like I can never take some time off. I can never stop trying to move that mountain up higher. I don't want to just like go over the hump of the mountain. I want Mount Everest, you know? And that's where I kind of am right now in a lot of aspects of my life. And I'm trying to figure out and put things in place to help me that can make whatever mountain comes up seem like a little hill, but it doesn't have to be me relying on me, which I think is another big part of this is relying on other people. Sometimes it has to be you. And I feel like that's a very important thing. And a lot of people do skip over that fact. Sometimes it is you. And if you find yourself in a scenario repeatedly, there's a common denominator in all that, and sometimes it is just you, and you are the issue, and that's where you need to sit down and face yourself and have that sort of inner talk, and the inner critic needs to win a little bit, and figure out how to flip it. But a lot of people from working in that factory, for example, I every day walked into there. There's as soon as you walk in the door on the left-hand side, there's just a little card swiper clocking in. I would walk in and there's, 100 to 150 people that live in our town who their backs are all caved in, their hands are barely working. And every day that I walked in there, I'm an able body, I doing this, and I look at all of them and I'm like, I don't want that to be me. That was my motivation. I don't want that to be me. I want more from myself. I want more for my family. Not that there's anything wrong with being a factory worker, if that's what but I always knew that I wanted to do something bigger. I just had to figure out the stepping stones to get me there. And that example was a moment that was like, push me forward. You need to do this. You need to do this. The downhill, this is what you're going in. Another example would be whenever I lost my mom. That was, arguably the biggest by far moment in my life where it was a kick in the pants, so to speak, to what I needed to do. And if there's any silver lining whatsoever that came out of me losing my mom so unexpectedly, for context, we lost my mom completely unexpectedly to a random bacteria infection on Valentine's Day, 2 weeks before COVID happened, and it was my Valentine's Day is my parents' anniversary. It was on their 33rd anniversary on Valentine's Day, and then we go through all of that, and we're still obviously reeling from that craziness, and then COVID happens, and then I got laid off from my job right after that. The whole world was going crazy, everyone's panicked. So like my personal world came crashing down, and then literally the whole world came crashing down. And I'm just sitting in my house, can't even leave, just wallowing in all of that feeling and all the sadness and all the things. And so I didn't really have time, I don't feel, to process that a lot. But it came back to a head like 6 months later, where there was another one of those moments for me where it was like 3:00 in the morning and I was on my kitchen floor just crying. And I didn't know, like I couldn't get over the feeling of losing my mom. She was like the glue for our whole family. And Mary was there with me. And I was just like, I can't keep going like this. Like I can't keep going down this hill, basically. In the valley, I was digging a hole in the bottom of the valley is where I was at that point. And I knew at that moment, like I can't keep doing this. And I had pushed the ice cream pail of change had happened about 2 years previously. So I had been working towards building up my business and things. And I was like, if anything taught me anything about losing my mom, it's that your life can end unexpectedly. And my mom worked her butt off her whole life to try to provide for us and help elevate what we could do. But she worked at Walmart for almost 30 years. Walmart literally fired her whenever she got diagnosed with cancer. And that was another, like, you can work literally 30 years at a place and they will just fire you, replace you. This factory I'm working in will replace me if anything happens to me. They need it to be done. I don't matter to them other than being a worker. And that doesn't fulfill me in my life, which is the bigger thing. And so I just took that as, I lost my mom. This is a wake-up call again. I don't need to do what I don't like to do that's not providing for my family. It's not enough anyways. I don't need to keep putting myself through that every day. And so I was 28 years old at that point. And like I told you, I'd always had the goal of working for myself by the time I was 30. And I turned 29 in 2021 and left my job 2 months later. So I beat it by 10 months.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing all that because, again, there's so much about people's stories that we don't know. You know, and so if you're just now meeting Bryon, you just hear that he has this great business and he does podcasts and he does photography and video for people all the time. But I think that's a really great lesson, is really kind of see people and recognize that even through your own adversity, you don't have to hide from it and be ashamed of it. In those chapters when you talked about digging a hole in the valley. Yeah. And by all means, I don't want to get in the space of silver lining adversity all the time. It's just seeing adversity for what it is, not giving it more credit or less credit, right? Because sometimes the things that we numb are the things that we keep. But there's a visual. Now you're on this side. I would never say this to somebody in the middle of the valley. But this helps build resilience in the confidence piece, right? So I want to touch on two things that you said, because you gave me a lot of things there to really think about. But this visual of when you're buried and you feel buried, there's a bunch of people that talk about this quote, but it really resonates with me about maybe you're not being buried at all. Maybe you're being planted. So when you're at your lowest, again, don't say this to somebody when they're at their lowest. When they're on their way up and they're blooming, give them that perspective so that they know that worst of times actually was planting them to be the person that they needed to be the most true version of themselves, to grow, to blossom, to whatever the thing is. When you talk about people that are successful, it's the being buried that often is what makes them successful, because there has to be something intrinsic enough to change your life. Extrinsic things happen. COVID happens. All these other things happen. People lose their jobs. And, you know, obviously losing somebody in your family is an intrinsic thing. It's not just an extrinsic thing. But the thing that you kind of said that really, I hope people learned from what you just said, is that sometimes it's you. And we've talked about this in this podcast a couple of times, but I didn't say it in like the direct way. But that sometimes it's you should be followed up with, it's my responsibility to get out. Yeah. It may not be your fault that you are in every situation that you're in, not your upbringing, things that happened to you. Those things weren't your fault, but it's your responsibility to then, right? Hopefully that's the put on the armor, take the deep breath in, pick your chin back up, because if you got yourself there, you can get yourself out. Because oftentimes when we're going through something tough, we rely on somebody else solely, but then they may help us kind of like look in a new direction. But then we don't have the confidence because we're going to rely on somebody else all the time because we haven't learned to rely on ourselves. And then when you talked about all of the steps, when you're like, it's a different lifetime ago. And I'm not saying this about you necessarily, but that fear that it might happen again, one of the best things to do when you're in that space is stop and think about what you've done to get where you are, because then it doesn't feel like luck. It doesn't feel like chance. It feels like a result of the work you've done. So that there are times, and I hear people talk about this all the time too, if you take all the money away from the richest people in the world, or from everybody, and you say everybody gets the same amount of money, the wealthiest people will come back up to the top because they know how they got there. Mm-hmm. The people that win the lottery, they spend all that money and all the things because they didn't become somebody who earned it, who knew what to do with it, who appreciated it, who was grateful for every step of the way. Because that gratitude that you probably have of not being where you were is probably more profound than we'll be able to really ever talk about, but it's not by chance. It's not by luck. It's not because somebody else didn't do something or my message on Facebook of I'm looking for a videographer, right? Landed everybody saying you. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't luck. There were lots of people that responded back with other people, but I just called you, right? And so when you think about, was that luck? Well, no, it was because of who you are as a person, all the work you put in. And so if you're going through that adversity and you feel like you've overcome adversity before, give yourself the credit for the steps that you've taken, because then it gives you more confidence. So whenever, say if all of a sudden the person who owns this building says, okay, everybody has to be out of the building and we're going to bulldoze it. Sure, you're going to have to, it's adversity. Yeah. You're going to have to figure something out, but you know what you've done to build it. Same thing with my business and everything. I've pivoted 100 different ways, but I know what I've done to build it, which is more build myself so that I can be better for everybody that I get to speak to and I get to coach. So if somebody said, virtual, right, was another bit of adversity. So where it's like, well, live speaking engagements during COVID went down. Well, I just started doing virtual speaking engagements during that time. Yeah. I just learned how to figure out how to be a presence on a Zoom camera. I learned how to do a background. I learned all these things, right? And that's where you found me because you were like, hey, let's step it up and not just have you do what you're doing basic, right? Like this is next level. But it's that belief that you build in yourself by not solely relying on yourself, but first relying on yourself. Mm-hmm. Say like, you know what? I'm going to do this thing because I can and I will and I must. And Eric Thomas talks about that I can, I will, I must. Because when you have that no turning back, that burn the boats mentality, it's dangerous and it's risky and it feels unsafe, but you kind of had that, I'm going to do this business no matter what. And so if it's in your relationship, if you're going through adversity of like, we're going to build this and we're going to fix this no matter what, that is the burning the boat of what if it doesn't work? Yeah. Because I guarantee you, I don't even have to ask, if this whole business doesn't work out, are you going back to the factory?
Not unless my kids were starving. That would be that would be the last thing.
Right. But it's like that's not a plan B for you. Yeah. There was plan A, right? And you hear a lot of people talk about that too. And so when you go through adversity, when you're going through hardships, don't minimize it. Like let yourself feel all of it, because it's the you feeling all of it that actually does the thing inside of you to do what's required to no longer be there. Mm-hmm. But if you just minimize it, numb it, and don't give it the credit, and you're just like, yep, everything's fine. That's why I talk about the positivity versus presence. Like be present for yourself and be like, you know what? This is awful. I never want to be in this place ever again. And then get curious of like, how do I do this? Mm-hmm. But then remind yourself of that purpose frequently. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously you go home every night to your purpose. Yeah. Ultimately, like I know you love to do this stuff, but I know marrying your kids is everything. And that's why I know for sure, and I have the confidence in you that you don't need a plan B, because they're your plan A, right? They're your why. How you do it, because you know that you have the skills to do whatever you want. But also even in your relationship with Mary, like we don't really talk about that very much. We've had a couple conversations about different things, but being willing to kind of be humble enough to say like, I owned that, I messed that up, but then like really digging in the relationship and saying like, how can I show up for you? Yeah. How can I be better for you? Like that bit of relationship adversity is super, super important to not numb. Mm-hmm. Because if you act like everything's fine, again, we've talked about this, but the absence of war doesn't mean peace. So just because you don't have zero money doesn't mean that you are at peace with how much money you actually have. Yeah. Right? So maybe you were $1 shy of digging into the pail. Like maybe you never had that pail moment. Yeah. But you like that bit of pail moment, those two moments that you kind of talked about really shaped you into the new person, right? And so when we talk about mindset shifts all the time, you're not worried about, you probably don't even feel like you're the same person that you were 5 years ago. But what can happen when people have that kind of shift is that lack of confidence because they don't remember how they got there.
Yeah.
So my nudge to people too, as they're getting through adversity and going through it is, and when I talk about journaling, it's not just about feel goods. It's about like being present enough with yourself so that you can have that belief and get to know yourself. Because if you trust yourself and you keep more promises to yourself, you can get through anything. Mm-hmm. Just like whenever you have really good friends that you trust and you love and you respect and you want the best for them, like you guys could get through anything. Well, that's also the relationship you need to build with yourself, because it's a matter of like, no matter what adversity faces me, right? Now I talk about my knee surgery, and I had to catch myself a little bit too, because I say it's just a knee problem. I had to do some work on that because I was also minimizing, but you haven't been able to walk, play golf, do anything that you normally do, because I'm normally active all day long, every second of the day. Mm-hmm. Not sleeping well. My energy's all over the place. Nutritionally, it's a mess. You'll see this physical transformation on this podcast, which I was thinking about on my way into the studio today, is thinking about, I'm going to look like a totally different person. But it's because I'm actually able to be more myself. But I had to also kind of dig in and be like, you know what? How can I still learn and grow through this? How can I learn more? How can I become more and do better and not let the adversity overwhelm me so much, but also give it the credit of like, it's been tough to not be able to do anything that I normally do for 2 years. Mm-hmm. I had to like allow myself to feel that. So the things that I'm talking about are actual things that I'm processing and healing from and going through. And I think a lot of times on podcasts and books, you hear people and you're like, oh my gosh, they got it all figured out. Because that creates a gap from the listeners, right? The people watching and the people listening. It creates a gap between us and them. But that's the thing I really honestly appreciate about you being vulnerable enough to come on here and for me to give the space too, because it's really, we want to be with as many people as possible. Mm-hmm. We haven't all figured it out. Today, we are more confident and better about handling adversity than we were a year ago, but not as good as we're going to be a year from now. Mm-hmm. You know, and we're going to be in a totally different place because I never saw this happening a year ago, you know? And so it's just like that optimism, right? Of through adversity as well as like, this is just a chapter that's challenging me. Maybe it's not breaking me. Maybe it's molding me. Maybe it's preparing me for what's to come. Just like that little bit of optimism. Don't numb it, but also don't get stuck in it, right? And people say all the time, it's okay to not be okay. You just have to like get past the point of, you know, wanting better and wanting more. And, you know, you just can't stay in that not okay space. But it takes a lot of self-reflection and self-awareness and courage, but it also takes people, the people around you, to really rise you up. Because I'm sure there's people along your journey who haven't been as supportive or who didn't believe in you. But oftentimes when you're going through something tough, you have to first believe in yourself and then allow other people to actually believe in you as well, because other people may believe in you, but if you don't believe in yourself, it's never actually going to go all the way across the finish line. Yeah. And truthfully, that's kind of been my story. I'll say my adversity is that I've been doing both this business and my day job for a while. But that's not actually it at all. People have been telling me for the last 10 years, why aren't you going off and doing the business and doing the thing? And even when we first started talking, you're like, what are you doing? Why aren't you doing this all the time? And like, it doesn't matter how much other people believed in me. It was pressure, right? Now I've adapted this. Pressure is a privilege, you know, but also I didn't believe in myself, which sounds, I mean, it is what it is. I don't even need to say, I don't need to judge how it sounds. You all can hear it. But it's just like that. I needed to do the work inside of myself before I did what you're doing and what you've done. And so for me, like, it's inspiring me to really kind of dig in and be like, it doesn't matter anything external. I'm not waiting on somebody else to make my business work. I'm not waiting on somebody else to do anything for me to make me think that I'm worthy and deserving and ready, and imposter syndrome we'll talk about in another episode. But there's just so much in that. Maybe it just starts with you. Maybe self-belief, self-confidence, ownership, humility, right? Just taking responsibility for your life is maybe the first step through any sort of adversity. And that's what you've articulated so eloquently today. So I appreciate you opening up, sharing everything. You add value to my life. You add value to everybody that's listening. And I appreciate the opportunity to even be here, and just know that that everything that you do and everything that you're saying, whether it's in this community or in your family or even with your friends and clients, whoever, that gets to know you as a better person for getting to know you and hopefully giving yourself that credit along the way, that you just being you is enough. And maybe you're helping people through more adversity. And honestly, we hope for all of you that what we've shared is helping you lean in to your adversity more. And we hope that you're giving yourself more grace, even if it's adversity or challenges that maybe you've caused. Maybe you're the reason why some of these things happened, but don't beat yourself up for it. Recognize that you have the power to move past it. But also know that it's not shame that you should feel. It's responsibility. Take responsibility for what you can. Find peace in the things that have happened. And like we've talked about in this episode, maybe it's a reframe of the adversity you're going through. While you feel everything through that adversity, you start to use the adversity instead of the adversity using you. Take that one step. Maybe it's you. And maybe wouldn't that be something if you were the only reason why you were able to overcome that adversity that you feel like is breaking you? Maybe it's just shaping you. So I'll remind you, like I do with every single one of these episodes, that you always have the power and the choice to reshape your mindset, live with intention, and look at the world through a grateful lens. Until the next episode, never stop.